So the coronavirus stimulus has included provisions like UBI and emergency small business loans, but with an unemployment rate that could reach as high as 30%. It's going to take a lot more than that to restore the economy.
So Georgia U.S. Senate candidate, University of Georgia philosophy professor Richard Winfield, he argues that we need a restructuring of the American political economy for national resilience in situations like this. And Richard joins us now via Skype to elaborate. Richard, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Richard, tell us a little bit about this crisis and whether you think that the response is enough.
Well, I think the response is inadequate on many fronts. It's clear that we don't have a choice between containing the pandemic and shutting down the economy, because obviously we have to maintain the parts of the economy that sustain our health services, our food services, our shelter, the transportation, that all of these depend upon our government and our media, so we're not blind in the crisis. The thing is, we also do have to provide people with funds for livelihood, but whatever cash we throw at people is going to not have enough to buy and not be able to maintain its value until at some point, as soon as we can, we resume economic activity.
Mm-hmm. And Richard,
this is not something that...
Sorry, let me just... We wanted to have you on because you're running for Senate in the state of Georgia in the Democratic primary. Give us a little bit of a sense of the contours of that race and how it's been changed since the coronavirus pandemic.
Okay, well, one thing to keep in mind, the race I am in is a special election with no primary. It goes all the way till November 3rd. So it's a field with almost, 10 candidates. There'll likely be a runoff. And the registration period came to an end on March 6th, which meant finally people knew who was in the race and various candidate forums and events were about to proceed. And then all of a sudden, political activity in person was completely suspended. So now everything is sort of limping along in a virtual way. And I think the media and organizations have not yet managed to reinvent virtual campaigning in a way that is getting to the public.
Richard, you're a philosophy professor. What is it, the unique perspective that you're trying to bring to the race, and why do you think it's most needed in the primary right now?
Yeah, well, I think ultimately our nation has suffered from a very incomplete and impoverished conception of freedom, which is rooted in the liberal social contract theory that thinks of freedom in terms of property rights and a government that upholds person and property with the consent of the governed. But that leaves out entirely the freedoms that pertain to family life and society. And our failure to recognize and enforce our family and social rights has left us unable to really have a functioning democracy in which we really have equal political opportunity. And it's left us much more defenseless against a pandemic than other nations. You know, we've failed to guarantee people a job at fair wages. We fail to guarantee people replacement income if they're unable to work. We fail to guarantee people health care, decent housing, education at all levels, legal representation, and of course, employee empowerment. Now, all of these things are matters that now need to be brought into play to rescue us from the situation we're in.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, the current holder of the seat that you're running for is Senator Kelly Loeffler, who's come under scrutiny for stock sales that she made immediately after receiving a briefing about the coronavirus pandemic. This, of course, as she was telling the American public that everything was fine and that the government had it under control. How has that news landed in the state? And is that something that you've been talking about in your campaigning, while acknowledging, of course, campaigning is frankly limited right now?
Yeah, campaigning is very limited, and it has been a matter of news. But, I think one has to concentrate on what are the positive proposals we need to enact. And that has to do with this social rights agenda that we need to implement as soon as possible. And it needs to be implemented in the first instance in a kind of emergency manner, but then it needs to be made permanent. So, for example, we need to ensure right away that everyone has their health care covered so that people can go in when necessary and be tested and get whatever care they need. And that also has to apply to undocumented individuals. Everyone in our society has to be able to have access to health care. Otherwise, we put the health of the entire nation in jeopardy. We're not going to be able to contain the pandemic. But that means we need to institute something akin to Medicare for all and make it a permanent fixture of a fair society.
So I find it interesting. Yeah. 1 second, Richard. I want to go into what you were talking about and bringing your expertise, your professorship into how you're running. You talked about liberal social contact theory. What is it about that in particular that you think that's missing from politics today?
Well, I think that there are many people who accept the kind of neoliberal idea of a kind of minimal state that is concerned simply with upholding the property rights of people, not at all concerned with the distribution of wealth and the opportunity of people to earn a decent living and to wield fair governance in their workplace, as well as to balance work and family and be able to sustain their family welfare. All of these things are ignored. And they're more ignored in the United States than in any developed nation. And we need to change that. And we are forced now in this pandemic emergency to institute aspects of this agenda that go beyond the minimal state, the neoliberal conception. And that means, first and foremost, we have to provide health care to everyone. We have to provide paid leave and paid family leave and paid sick leave. We have to ensure that everyone has a decent livelihood. And first and foremost, those who can work are given an opportunity to work in safe conditions. We need to ensure that work and family is balanced so that, for example, we have public child and elder care so that our children and our elders are taken care of when those who otherwise might care for them not only have to work, but may be under quarantine. We need to have child allowances to wipe out childhood poverty. The bill in question gives a one-time payment of $500 per child. According to the government's own statistics, you need $900 a month to take care of the cost of having a child, of raising a child. So we should make that a permanent aspect of our life. There should be a $900 monthly child allowance. And in that way, we can begin to make it possible for everyone to take care of their family, their children.
And Richard, I don't have to tell you, you're running in a fairly conservative state there in Georgia. Do you think that this crisis is changing the way that people think about government and relate to what government could in fact be doing to help them in their lives?
Well, I think many people were drawn to Donald Trump by his promises of bringing work back to America, bringing back manufacturing and the like. I think the issue of job insecurity and economic insecurity is weighing more than ever on everyone's head. And I think the time for solutions has come in a way that is much more drastic than ever before. And I think it's time for the electorate to wake up. And I think the circumstances we're facing provide us with a perfect storm. It's a question of whether there are going to be candidates out there who are going to be providing the true solutions of a federal job guarantee, of employee empowerment, including worker co-determination, where employees have half the seats of corporate boards, where we have mandatory collective bargaining in every workplace, and where we have the kind of benefits that allow work and family to be balanced, have, of course, something like Medicare for all, ensure that there's quality access to education for everyone, and we need also legal care for all, where we would provide a national insurance program covering all criminal and civil legal representation, just as Medicare for all does for health services. And that way we can all stand up and fight for our rights.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you, Richard. Yeah. We really appreciate you joining us. Very interesting.
Thank you so much, Richard. Good luck.
Okay. Thank you.
And we'll have more Rising for you after this.